Jungkook's chilling silence after a question about Taehyung shocks fans and ignites a viral storm. What was he hiding, and why couldn't he speak? Is it true about you and Taehyung? The question dropped like a thunderclap in the silent press room, slicing through the air with a weight that no one expected. Cameras blinked. The crowd froze. Even the journalists who were ready to fire off their next rehearsed questions went silent, their eyes darting to Jungkook, who sat stiffly under the blinding white lights of the press conference stage. Jungkook didn't move. He blinked once, his gaze faltering for the first time in an hour. His hands, clasped on the table, tightened. A breath hitched in his throat, but he didn't say a word. The seconds stretched. 5, 10, 15. And then he said it, quiet, low, final. No comment. That was all it took. Within minutes, the clip was trending worldwide. JUNGKOOK, no comment. What did he mean about TAHYUNG? Armies demand answers flooded every feed. But behind that single phrase was a storm he'd spent months trying to outrun. Backstage, as the team scrambled to control the narrative, Jungkook stood alone by the service exit, his hoodie pulled over his head, cigarette smoke curling into the cold air. He hated the taste, but he needed something, anything, to quiet the buzzing in his skull. He thought about Taehyung. He thought about that night. The rooftop, the city lights below them, the trembling in his chest when Taehyung had whispered something he should have forgotten by now, but couldn't. They were supposed to be okay now. Smiles on camera, handshakes, distance, all carefully choreographed like a performance they never rehearsed but always knew by heart. But that question, that damn question, had cracked something. Inside the van, Jimin watched the clip on repeat, his jaw clenched. The look in Jungkook's eyes when he said no comment wasn't just discomfort, it was grief, guilt, and maybe even fear. Namjoon paced their temporary suite, phone pressed to his ear, issuing calm but firm instructions to HYBE's PR team. We control the narrative. We say it was unrelated. Don't confirm, don't deny, just move. But behind the professionalism, even Namjoon felt the tremor. This wasn't just a media slip. Something had happened between Jungkook and Taehyung, and whatever it was, it had never truly healed. Taehyung, meanwhile, was nowhere to be found. He had left the gala early, slipping past fans and security alike. His phone was off. His last message to the group chat had been a simple heart emoji sent 12 hours ago. 12 hours felt like 12 years now. The truth was, they had all known something was wrong. Since the summer. Since that one rehearsal where Jungkook walked in late and Taehyung wouldn't even look at him. Since the footage that fans never saw, where Taehyung almost walked off stage after Jungkook reached for him during a choreo block. And the most terrifying part, no one knew exactly what happened. Not even Jimin, not even Yoongi, who always read people like books. It was like the two youngest members had carved out a silence too sharp for anyone to enter. Until now. Until one journalist, probably just trying to go viral, asked the one question Jungkook never wanted to answer. That night a private video leaked. It wasn't graphic, just 10 seconds. Taehyung and Jungkook in a hallway, Taehyung backing away. Jungkook reaching out, voice trembling, "Just let me explain." Taehyung's eyes were glassy. His words were unclear, but fans zoomed in, enhanced the audio, dissected every pixel. "I trusted you," Taehyung had seemed to say. The internet exploded. Jungkook's face was suddenly everywhere, not the smiling golden Maknae, but the haunted, sleepless version captured by paparazzi as he rushed into a Seoul studio at 3 a.m. Taehyung's Instagram went dark. Jimin stopped posting. Even RM's live broadcast was cut short after fans flooded it with questions. BTS wasn't just quiet. They were unraveling. But behind the scenes there was more. Jungkook's studio desk was covered in half-written letters, unsent messages addressed only by a single letter, T. One read, "I still see you in every verse." Another, I should have stopped it, but I didn't, and now you hate me. And one, smudged with water stains, simply said, please, don't make me a stranger. He never sent them, not one. Meanwhile, Taehyung spent most of his time in Paris, blending into the shadows of museums and late-night cafes. He walked without security. He answered no calls, and every now and then someone would spot him, alone, headphones in, eyes vacant. The silence between them became louder than any headline. The group tried to recover. They stood together at an awards show, smiled, laughed, but when the screen behind them showed a clip of their older performances, when Taehyung and Jungkook once sang into the same mic, shoulder to shoulder, both their smiles faltered, just for a second, but fans noticed. The no comment had become a ghost, a viral echo that refused to die. Until months later another clip surfaced, this time not from a press conference but a fan meet, a quiet moment, a handshake, Jungkook bending forward whispering something to a fan. The mic picked it up. You know, sometimes silence says everything. And just like that, it started again. What did Jungkook mean? Was it an apology? A confession? Or just another chapter in a story no one knew how to end? But if you looked closely in that same clip, in the blurred corner behind the fan's head was a figure with black sunglasses and a beanie, head turned slightly, watching. And if you froze the frame just right, you'd swear it was Taehyung. The rain began to fall without warning, sheets of water hammering down onto the city like a sudden release of everything that had been held back too long. Jungkook didn't flinch as he stood outside the side entrance of the arena, his hoodie clinging to his back, soaked through, his hair dark and dripping. A staff member approached with an umbrella, hesitated, then walked away silently. No one dared disturb him, not tonight. Inside, the others were still handling the aftermath. The silence Jungkook had gifted the press was now echoing louder than any speech he could have given. No comment. It was meant to be protection, meant to be restraint, meant to be safe. But it was fuel. And now the fire was everywhere. Jungkook leaned against the wall, eyes closed, the rain seeping into his skin like punishment. His phone buzzed again, another notification. He didn't look, he couldn't. If he opened it, it would be more headlines, more edits, more theories. Worse, it might be silence from Taehyung. That was always the hardest to read when you got nothing at all. No anger, no reply, no closure. He still remembered the night it began to fall apart. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 little ones like cracks spiderwebbing across glass. It was that late-night rehearsal when Jungkook showed up distracted, phone buzzing nonstop. It was Taehyung noticing, asking who was texting him, teasing at first, then pushing harder. It was Jungkook brushing it off, saying it was no one important. But it was asterisk someone, and Taehyung had known it. Known it by the way Jungkook couldn't meet his eyes. They fought, quietly at first, then louder, in dressing rooms, in hotel corridors, in studio booths where only the walls heard the full truth. It wasn't just about jealousy, it was deeper. It was betrayal of something sacred between them, a kind of trust that had been silently formed across years of shared stages, shared silence, shared pain, something wordless. And when it shattered, there were no clean lines to follow, only bleeding edges. Jimin had tried to hold them both, tried to mediate, tried to be the anchor when both of them were drifting in different directions. But even Jimin had limits, and he had his own wounds, watching two of the people he loved the most pretend they were fine, pretend in front of cameras, in front of millions, but never in front of each other. Jungkook pulled out his phone now, finally, not to check social media, but to scroll to his hidden album, a folder with no name, just a series of pictures, candid ones, blurry ones, some taken by accident, all of Taehyung. One in particular made him pause, a photo of Taehyung in the back of a van, head against the window, mouth slightly open, asleep. Jungkook had taken it during a trip to Busan. They weren't speaking much that day, but the moment had felt pure, safe. He remembered watching Taehyung sleep and thinking, I'll never let anything ruin this. But he did. He had. The door behind him opened suddenly and Namjoon stepped out, shielding his face from the rain. "They're asking if you want to make a statement tomorrow," he said, voice low. "You don't have to. I'll handle it." Jungkook didn't answer right away. He just stared out into the blurred city lights. Does it matter anymore? Namjoon hesitated. It does to some people. Jungkook's throat felt tight. To him. Namjoon didn't lie. I don't know. Back at the hotel, the others were gathered in one suite. Jimin was packing. Yoongi sat in silence with his arms crossed. Jin scrolled on his phone with a grim look. Hoseok was in the corner, biting his lip, trying to read through online reactions fast enough to predict what might come next. "No comment," Jimin muttered to himself for the third time. What was he thinking? Yoongi finally spoke. He was thinking if he said anything, it would hurt more than staying quiet. "But silence hurts too," Jimin snapped. Jin looked up. So does the truth. Taehyung was watching too from an apartment in Paris. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. He sat alone, wrapped in a blanket, eyes fixed on the replay of the press clip. He watched Jungkook's expression over and over, the flicker in his eyes, the way his lips parted before the words fell. No comment. He whispered the words back to the screen like a curse. Coward. But the pain in his chest didn't feel like victory. It felt like something dying, something that had been gasping for breath for too long. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. Finally he picked it up, one message from Jimin. "He's not okay." Taehyung stared at it for a long time. His fingers hovered over the screen, but he typed nothing, because what could he say? That he was okay either, that watching Jungkook fall apart felt like watching a reflection of his own wreckage. Meanwhile, the media frenzy didn't slow. If anything, it accelerated. Old clips resurfaced. Moments that fans once found adorable, shared glances, inside jokes, lyrics sung a little too intimately, were now dissected as asterisk evidence. New headlines screamed theories. Some were sympathetic, most weren't. HYBE remained silent. The group carried on publicly at least. Rehearsals resumed. Photo shoots went ahead. But behind every smile was a fracture. Every performance was a tightrope walk over an emotional chasm. One night after a particularly exhausting rehearsal, Jungkook stayed behind in the practice room. He danced alone, not to choreo, just moved, letting the music pull him in and out of memories. His body remembered things his mind tried to forget. The way Taehyung used to mirror his steps without looking, the laughter that once filled the mirrors, the closeness that once needed no explanation. He fell to his knees by the end, chest heaving, tears he hadn't meant to cry spilling freely. The room echoed his breath but gave no comfort. He didn't hear the door open. Didn't realize anyone was there. Not until he heard the voice, soft and strained. "Why didn't you just tell them the truth?" Jungkook's head snapped up. Taehyung stood there still pale, hands clenched at his sides. There was no one else. No cameras, no audience, just them, at last. Jungkook couldn't speak. Not because he didn't want to, but because the truth was, he didn't know what the truth was anymore. Was it the words they never said? The choices they made in silence? Or the way they kept walking away, over and over, when all they ever wanted was to be heard? Taehyung walked forward, slowly, carefully. Jungkook rose to his feet, unsure of what to do, what to say. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said finally, voice hoarse. "You already did," Taehyung replied. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Taehyung's eyes softened, just a little. "So," he said, quieter now, "what are you going to say next time they ask?" Jungkook swallowed. He didn't know yet. But for the first time in months, he knew who he wanted to say it to. Not the cameras. Not the fans. Just him. Jungkook stepped forward, closing the distance between them as if every inch he bridged might rewrite the past. The rehearsal room was quiet, the only sound coming from the hum of the speakers, still faintly buzzing with the echo of music that had long faded. His voice was low when he finally spoke again, trembling with a vulnerability he could no longer mask. "I didn't lie to protect myself. I lied because I didn't think I deserved forgiveness." Taehyung's expression wavered. The hurt in his eyes didn't disappear, but the sharpness softened, like the edge of a blade that had been dulled by sorrow. He searched Jungkook's face, looking not for an apology but for truth, for something real. "And now," Taehyung asked, "do you think you do?" Jungkook looked down, then up again, his eyes glassy. "No, but I still want it." The rain had stopped outside, but the storm hadn't. It lived in both of them, in the silence that stretched and snapped, in every word unsaid and every glance stolen over the past year. Jungkook ran a hand through his wet hair and let out a shaky breath. "I kept thinking if I acted like it didn't happen, it would go away. The distance, the mistrust. But every day it got louder, especially when I saw you and I couldn't even say your name without it catching in my throat." Taehyung took a step back, the memory of that final argument flooding his senses. The rooftop confrontation, the accusations, the heartbreak that came not from what was said but from what wasn't, the choice Jungkook made, the silence that followed. "You chose your image," Taehyung said bitterly. "You chose to let the world think we were just fine." "I chose wrong," Jungkook whispered, and the words landed like ash between them. "But I'm not choosing silence anymore." They stood there, hearts pounding in tandem, the years of friendship, closeness, and something deeper binding them still, like a scar you didn't want to erase because it reminded you of what once mattered. Jungkook moved closer, and this time Taehyung didn't step away. "I was scared," Jungkook said. "Scared they'd twist our story, that if I told them what we really were, it would ruin everything we built." "What were we, Jungkook?" Taehyung's voice cracked, not from anger but from something more fragile. Hope maybe, or the last flicker of it. Jungkook swallowed hard, his voice nearly breaking. "We were everything, and I destroyed it." Taehyung looked away, blinking fast, the air around them charged with memories too raw to hold. The way Jungkook used to glance at him during encore stages, how their fingers brushed in passing, how entire conversations passed between them without a single word. It wasn't just friendship. It wasn't romance either. It was something in between, something sacred and undefined and now broken. But maybe not beyond repair. In the days that followed, the media circus raged on. The leaked video of them in the practice room was enough to send fandoms into meltdown. Speculations ran wild. Was this a reunion, a confrontation, a farewell? HYBE released a vague statement urging the public to respect the members' privacy. It did nothing to stop the storm. Jungkook and Taehyung stayed silent this time together. They didn't post. They didn't attend scheduled appearances. The world watched, waiting, dissecting every clue. Then, without warning, a new clip appeared. No press, no manager interference. Just Jungkook sitting in his studio, camera angled simply, no filters, no editing. Raw. "I've been silent," he began. "Not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't know how to say it right." He paused, his eyes drifting to something off camera. A notebook maybe, or a memory. "I hurt someone I care about more than I can explain. And I let the world think it didn't matter because I was too afraid to show the truth." His hands trembled slightly, but he didn't stop. "The truth is, sometimes your biggest mistake isn't what you did. It's what you didn't do, the words you didn't say, the people you let walk away." He looked straight into the camera now. "I let him walk away, and I stayed quiet, but not anymore." The video ended. No credits, no hashtags, just truth. Within minutes, the internet erupted. Some fans cried, some criticized, some speculated. But for the first time, the speculation wasn't just noise. It was conversation, real conversation. Taehyung saw the video in a cab on the way to the airport. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just stared, heart pounding. And when the driver asked if he was okay, he said nothing, just nodded faintly and asked to turn the car around. Jimin opened the door when Taehyung showed up at the dorm. His eyes widened, but he didn't ask anything. He just stepped aside. Jungkook was in the kitchen, eating leftover tteokbokki straight from the pot, hoodie sleeves pushed to his elbows, eyes tired. He looked up. Their eyes met. Neither moved. Until Taehyung did. He walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat down across from him. No words. Just presence. Just being. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't resolution. But it was something, a beginning. Later that night, Yoongi joined them in the living room, throwing a blanket over both of them without a word. Jin brought tea. Hoseok turned the TV on low, not to watch, but to fill the silence with something softer. Jimin sat at the edge of the couch, arms folded, watching both of them, his brothers, begin to find their way back. Jungkook didn't post again for weeks, but when he did, it was a photo. A quiet one. 2 hands holding onto the same mic during rehearsal, blurry, no faces. Just a caption. We were never broken, just lost. Taehyung reposted it with one word. Found. And in that silence, the world finally understood. The studio lights were off, but the room wasn't dark. A pale glow spilled in through the wide windows, tinting the instruments and music sheets in soft silver. It was past midnight. Seoul slept, but Jungkook didn't. He sat cross-legged on the floor beside the couch, his phone lying face down, untouched. The silence was thick, not uncomfortable, but heavy, like it knew something had changed. He could still feel it, the way Taehyung had looked at him when he sat down across the table with nothing to say and everything to feel. There had been no grand forgiveness, no melodramatic embrace, just the steady presence of someone who once knew you inside out, and was still willing to be in the same room even after everything burned. He ran a hand down his face, exhaling slowly. He hadn't slept since the video. It was strange, how saying something that real, that raw, didn't bring relief. It just uncovered more. He reached for the guitar beside him, the strings cool to the touch. For a moment he didn't play. He just held it, fingers resting where they always had. His mind drifted to the past. Bus rides and cramped green rooms, midnight rehearsals, laughter that echoed off mirrors, the warmth of Taehyung's shoulder against his, the way their voices blended so naturally it felt like fate. He had written 100 songs since then, none of them right. Until now. He strummed once, soft, hesitant. And then again. A progression, simple, minor chords, a melody that trembled like a held breath. He began humming, no words yet, just emotion. That was how it always started for him, feeling first, meaning after. Behind him, the door creaked open quietly. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. Taehyung stepped in, barefoot, hair messy, eyes tired. He was wearing an old sweatshirt Jungkook recognized. It was his, from years ago, something he hadn't seen since they last shared a hotel room during the Love Yourself tour. That simple sight hit him harder than any confrontation. You're still awake, Taehyung said, voice soft, not accusing. I never really sleep, Jungkook answered, his voice just as low. Taehyung walked over and sat on the floor across from him, mirroring his position. For a long while they didn't speak, just sat, the melody lingering in the air between them. I heard it, Taehyung finally said. Jungkook paused, fingers stilled on the strings. The song. No, the silence. Jungkook looked up, startled. Taehyung's expression didn't hold anger anymore, just weariness, honesty. I heard it in every stage we stood on together after the fight, in the way you avoided eye contact, in how you stopped reaching for me during choreo, in how you laughed a second too late at my jokes. I kept pretending it wasn't there, but it was. Jungkook's hands dropped from the guitar. I didn't know how to fix it. You didn't even try. That landed. He winced, eyes dropping to the carpet. I thought maybe if I just kept going, kept showing up, it would fix itself, like we always did. We're not the same anymore, Taehyung said. I know, Jungkook murmured. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Jungkook looked up again. Taehyung continued, we're older now, messier, we've seen more, felt more. Maybe we lost some of that innocent closeness, but maybe what comes next is something stronger, something realer. Jungkook swallowed. You still want something to come next? Taehyung didn't hesitate. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. The air shifted. Jungkook reached for the guitar again, strumming a slower rhythm this time. I started writing something, not for release, just for us. Taehyung nodded. Can I hear it? Jungkook met his gaze. There was a flicker of the old him there, boyish, hopeful, terrified. Only if you sing it with me. Taehyung smiled, small, real. Always. They worked on it through the night, line by line, chord by chord. Memories folded into lyrics, pain turned into poetry. They didn't talk about the past directly, but it seeped into the song, into the pauses, the unresolved notes, the falters in their voices when a lyric cut too close. It was healing in disguise. By sunrise, they had something raw, imperfect, but honest. They didn't rush to record it, didn't rush to share. It wasn't for that. It was for them, proof that something broken could still make something beautiful. Weeks passed. The media noise dulled. Fans moved on to new stories, new distractions. But those who truly watched, truly knew them, noticed subtle shifts. Taehyung began joining Jungkook in studio selfies again. Jungkook laughed harder in interviews. They stood closer during live shows. And one day, without warning, a clip surfaced, not leaked but posted intentionally. It was just them, sitting side by side on stools in a sunlit room. Acoustic. No label. No makeup. Just two voices, singing the song they wrote that night. It wasn't promoted. No hashtag. But it spread faster than any press release ever could. The lyrics weren't explicit, no names, no confessions. But those who listened, really listened, heard the story. Heard the distance. Heard the return. The top comment read, "This isn't a love song, this is a survival song." And it was. It survived silence. It survived pride. It survived them. After the performance, Jungkook turned to Taehyung on camera, not with dramatics but with the quiet intensity that once defined them. "Thank you for coming back." Taehyung looked at him, eyes soft. "I never really left." The screen faded to black. And for the first time in a long time, the silence that followed didn't hurt. It healed. The hotel suite was unusually quiet, filled with morning light and the distant hum of traffic. Jungkook stood at the wide window, holding a cup of coffee he hadn't sipped, eyes drifting over the city that had watched them grow, break, and somehow find their way back. Behind him, the air still carried the warmth of their late-night recording, and the quiet presence of Taehyung, asleep on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket Jungkook had thrown over him a few hours before. Sleep hadn't come easily for Jungkook, not because he was anxious anymore, but because everything that had once felt like chaos now felt still. And stillness was something new, something terrifying in its own right. He was used to movement, noise, distraction. But now there was silence again, this time not from avoidance but peace. And peace, he was learning, came with a strange kind of ache. He turned, watching Taehyung stir, the soft shift of his body beneath the blanket, his face calm in sleep. It was a sight Jungkook hadn't seen in years, not like this. Not without makeup, stage lights, or the eyes of a million people watching them. Just him, just Taehyung. And in that moment, Jungkook realized that what he had missed the most wasn't the grand gestures or public performances. It was the quiet. Taehyung blinked awake slowly, eyes adjusting, confusion giving way to recognition as he found Jungkook's gaze. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Taehyung sat up, rubbing his eyes, and let out a breath that sounded like relief. "You didn't sleep," he said, voice low and rough. Jungkook smiled faintly, didn't want to miss the morning. Taehyung studied him for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, mornings are different now." There was a pause. "Are you okay?" Taehyung asked, quieter this time. Jungkook looked down into his cup, then back up. "I think I am. I don't know what happens next with everything, but I think I'm okay." Taehyung stood, pulling the blanket tighter around himself, and walked over to stand beside him. They looked out at the skyline together, shoulder to shoulder, and said nothing more. Later that day, they returned to the studio. Not for a schedule, not for a label, just them. The air felt different now, not heavy but open. Jungkook set up the mic while Taehyung tuned his guitar, both moving in sync, like old habits reawakening. They recorded a demo, not the one they had already shared, but something new, a continuation, a reply. The lyrics were subtle, woven with questions and acceptance. There was no mention of names or places, but the story was clear. The sound was soft. Melancholic but hopeful, a confession wrapped in chords. Outside, the world was beginning to speculate again. Fans noticed the patterns, the way they had started wearing similar pieces again, the way their eyes seemed to find each other in group interviews, the quiet smirks that spoke of inside jokes no one else understood. But there were no statements, no confirmations. This time, they let the music speak. One evening, as they walked out of a quiet cafe tucked in the backstreets of Mappo, a few fans spotted them. No bodyguards, no cameras, just two figures under the same umbrella. Taehyung had instinctively moved the umbrella higher so it covered more of Jungkook. Jungkook had looked at him and said something no one could hear, but the smile on Taehyung's face was enough. A photo made its way online. Blurry, warm, unmistakably intimate. It trended within an hour. Jungkook saw it later that night and chuckled, handing his phone to Taehyung, who rolled his eyes but smiled anyway. "Do they ever miss anything?" "They never have," Jungkook replied, leaning back on the couch. The next day, HYBE requested a meeting. They were gentle, careful, asked if the two of them wanted to restructure their joint narrative. In corporate terms, it meant one thing: capitalize on the renewed interest. Jungkook and Taehyung listened politely, then declined. "We're not selling a reconciliation," Taehyung said, firm but calm. "We're just living it." The label agreed, albeit reluctantly, but they knew better than to push. Some stories, after all, were too fragile to package, too sacred to brand. A few months passed. The group began working on a new album. It was the first time in a long time that all 7 members were in the same space, breathing the same creative air. The energy was electric, cautious, warm. Everyone had changed, time had done that, but something unspoken remained. A bond that had been stretched, bruised, tested, but never broken. During one of the late-night brainstorming sessions, Namjoon leaned against the studio wall, arms crossed, watching Jungkook and Taehyung finish the bridge of a track they'd been building together for weeks. He smiled, quiet and proud. "You two finally figured it out, huh?" he said when they took a break. Jungkook glanced at Taehyung, then nodded. "I think we're still figuring it out." "That's the point," Taehyung added, sipping from his water bottle. "It's not about arriving, it's about not walking away." The album came together slowly, with intention. The lyrics were deeper, the sound more experimental, but fans could feel the difference. There was history in every note, healing in every harmony. And when the album dropped, it wasn't the title track that stole everyone's heart. It was track 7. A quiet duet. No choreography. No flashy MV. Just 2 voices, layered like memory and forgiveness. The lyrics hinted at a journey of fire and ice, of shattered things and rebuilt bridges. There was a line that fans quoted endlessly: "I lost you in the silence but found you in the song." They performed it once, live acoustic under a soft spotlight on a small stage. Taehyung wore black, Jungkook wore white. Their voices met in the middle. At the end they didn't bow. They looked at each other, nodded once. The audience cried. Not just fans, but people. Because they saw something real. And in a world addicted to spectacle, that was rare. After the performance, Jungkook and Taehyung walked backstage, shoulders brushing. They didn't say anything dramatic. Just, "Wanna get noodles?" "Yeah." And they did. Down the street. No disguise. No fear. Just them. They laughed about old tour pranks, teased each other about vocal flubs, debated the best Jajangmyeon in Seoul. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't have to. They were living the future. And it was enough. The studio smelled faintly of lavender-scented candle wax and hot equipment, an oddly calming mix that Jungkook had come to associate with the rare kind of safety he only felt in rooms like this. Rooms where music lived. Rooms where silence wasn't emptiness but space. Space to think, to breathe, to be. The red recording light had gone off hours ago, but neither he nor Taehyung had moved. They were still sitting on the floor, backs against opposite walls, shoes off, sharing a bag of half-eaten spicy chips and sips from the same water bottle. The city outside blinked with neon life, but inside, the world had slowed to the perfect rhythm of nothingness. Jungkook's eyes drifted to Taehyung's profile. He looked different now. Softer, maybe. Not because of time, but because of the quiet grace that had returned to him. Like someone who had gone to war with himself and walked back with a few scars and a whole lot of truth. There were lines beneath his eyes that hadn't been there before, but his laugh had come back. So had the way he tilted his head when he was curious, and the way his fingers danced absent-mindedly when music played nearby. Those were the things Jungkook had missed the most. Taehyung caught him looking. "You're starring," he said, voice low, teasing. Jungkook smiled faintly. "I forgot how peaceful you look when you're not trying to prove something." Taehyung raised an eyebrow, then smirked. "I'm always proving something, even if it's just that I can eat more chips than you." Jungkook chuckled, throwing a chip at him. It bounced off Taehyung's knee, landing between them. Neither picked it up. Silence returned, but it wasn't awkward. It hadn't been for a while, not since the rooftop, not since the late-night confessions and the song that stitched them back together. "You think they'll ever stop asking?" Taehyung asked suddenly, staring up at the soundproof ceiling. "About us?" Jungkook asked, though he already knew the answer. Taehyung nodded. Jungkook leaned his head back, exhaling through his nose. "Probably not." Taehyung looked over at him. "Does it still bother you?" There was a pause. Jungkook thought about all the times he used to scroll through comment sections, looking for validation and ending up drowning in doubt. He thought about the edits, the speculations, the headlines that tried to write stories for them without permission. He thought about the time when one word, asterisk no comment asterisk, had created a hurricane he couldn't stop. "Not anymore," Jungkook finally said, "because they don't know the whole story and they never will, but we do." Taehyung nodded, and this time his smile was warm. "We do." The next morning they walked into the group meeting side by side. There was no big announcement, no change in their dynamic that anyone could label or reduce, but the others noticed. In the way they spoke, in the way they sat next to each other without thinking, in the way Taehyung reached for Jungkook's coffee mid-sentence and Jungkook just slid it over without looking. Jin leaned over to Jimin and whispered, "They're finally back." Jimin smirked. They never left, they just got quiet. The meeting was about the group's anniversary event, something the label wanted to make monumental. A documentary, a live concert, an album repackage, all of it. Everyone chimed in with ideas, but it was Yoongi who asked the question that made the room still. What do we want? The table went silent. Not what the fans wanted, not what the company expected, but what they as 7 people who had shared the weight and wonder of a global legacy, wanted. Namjoon spoke first. I want to tell the truth, not in a dramatic way, but honestly. I want to show who we are now, not just who we were. Hoseok nodded. I want joy again, not performance joy, real joy. Jimin whispered, I want to sing something that scares me. Yoongi smiled, eyes crinkling. That's the only kind worth singing. Then everyone looked at Taehyung and Jungkook. They didn't speak right away. Taehyung turned to Jungkook, a silent question in his eyes. Jungkook answered without hesitation, I want to stop hiding. It wasn't a statement of sexuality, or love, or scandal. It was about fear. About silence. About reclaiming the right to be human again. Taehyung added, I want to sing the truth even if it's messy. No one asked for specifics. No one needed them. They understood. And so, the anniversary project became something different. Not a polished celebration of past glories, but a raw, vulnerable, cinematic journey into their present. They filmed themselves. Not with crews or scripts, but on handheld cameras, iPhones, old camcorders from their trainee days. They filmed their creative process, their mistakes, their quiet dinners, the laughter that came after 3 hours of dancing, the frustration when lyrics didn't land, the tears that came uninvited, the hugs that lasted too long and not long enough. And somewhere in the middle of it all, between recording sessions and ramen cups, Jungkook and Taehyung wrote a second song. Not a duet. A dialogue. 2 voices, 2 perspectives, 2 parts of the same timeline intersecting in pain, misunderstanding, and ultimately grace. They called it Echo. The lyrics traced the outlines of their silence, the moments where one spoke and the other stayed still, the mirrors they avoided, the nights spent wondering who was more wrong. But the chorus said this. I heard your silence like a scream inside my chest. I answered too late. But I'm singing now. If love is an echo, then let it rest in the sound of us, breaking without breaking down. When the song premiered during the final segment of the anniversary documentary, fans stopped breathing. Not because it confirmed anything, but because it revealed everything. There were no pronouns in the song. No labels. Just truth. And that truth hit harder than any headline ever could. After the credits rolled, there was a short clip. Jungkook and Taehyung sitting on the floor of the studio, side by side. Jungkook spoke first. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't losing someone, it's choosing to stay even after everything's changed. Taehyung added, and realizing that staying doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Jungkook looked at him. Taehyung looked back. The screen faded to black. And the world finally exhaled. In the months that followed, their bond wasn't used for promotion. It wasn't branded. It wasn't made into a ship. It was simply allowed to be. They kept making music. Sometimes together. Sometimes apart. But always honest. Always present. And the silence that once stood between them. It was still there sometimes. But now it had edges they both understood. And in that understanding, they found something stronger than friendship or fandom or fame. They found freedom. To be seen. To be flawed. To be whole.